What?
Is anyone out there?
Yeah, we're just waiting for a few more people to come on.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan. We have about 76 people that are signed up for this training, so that's great, and we appreciate everybody coming today. I'm just going to give it another minute or so because we have lots of dinging still going on, meaning people are still coming into the meeting.
Okay.
And Megan, looking at my participants, I have 131 people signed in today right now. It's still going up.
So the town of June Lake. That's the 7th of our population. That's great.
Yeah, we have people from all the different communities attending today. And as people are getting on, I'll just kind of give a little kind of a update and scenario. I do want to thank everybody. And let me put my video on so people can see me. I did want to thank everybody that's participating in all of the Bridgeport shelters and, you know, just the different events and trying to keep our county moving and operating during these storms and during the upcoming storms that we have now. Social services is the department that is tasked with sheltering in the county. And we work with our Red Cross partners to provide sheltering throughout the county. And with the next storm coming in, as it is an atmospheric river, our social services shelter coordinators are actively working on trying to find volunteers and position and get some water, snacks, those types of things to all of the communities throughout our county. We have 8 shelter trailers and 8 communities that we are currently prepping for. And that is in Walker, Bridgeport, Lee Vining, June Lake, Mammoth Lakes, Crowley Lake, Chalfont, and Benton. So we do have quite a task ahead of us if things do happen, but we are just very much trying to be a little bit ahead of the ball and make sure that we have you know, have people in place should we need them. I would ask that everybody on the call today, if you can go to the chat and please, so you can get credit for today's class, I would like you to put in your name, your cell phone number, and your email address. And this way we will make sure to check it with our volunteer lists. And Red Cross will also have access to this information. And for anybody that is thinking about or wanting to pursue becoming an actual Red Cross volunteer, then we can make sure that we get this training counted for you as you move forward. There would be some other orientation trainings and stuff that would allow you to become a volunteer, and I will have Megan speak to that in just a moment. I still have quite a few people popping on, and I think they have been sending this information out. Hold on just one moment.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. While Kathy is stepping aside to take her phone call, I'll just go ahead and get started a little bit here. Just a couple of housekeeping issues, of course. We do have a lot of people on this call. Super grateful that you're all joining today. Super exciting. So please do keep your phone or computer on mute while the presentation is going on. Kathy will be monitoring the chat box, and I'm kind of keeping my eye on that as well. And we'll also have time for a Q&A period at the end. No need for crazy note taking. We'll absolutely send this slide deck to you out after the presentation. So just a quick steps on what we'll be looking at. A little bit about me, first of all, teeny weeny bit about the Red Cross. And the bulk of our time here, about 45 minutes, hopefully we'll be talking about our Red Cross shelter fundamentals. And then, so here's a little bit about me. My name is Megin Hughes. I've been with the Red Cross for just about 9 years now. Currently, I work as the Senior Volunteer Recruitment Specialist, which means it's my job to convince people that the Red Cross is the most amazing organization that you should volunteer for, which I do firmly believe. If you're wondering why a volunteer recruiter is here doing shelter training, my past 8 years were spent in disaster services. 4 years as the disaster program manager here. I was previously the Red Cross job director for the Mountain View fire, and then a couple of other responses as well. I am out of Bakersfield, California, and our chapter does serve the Kern, Inyo, and Mono County area. And my contact information is there, megan.hughes@redcross.org, and my phone number. Should you all have any questions about sheltering or Red Cross, or like to know more about becoming a Red Cross volunteer, please do not hesitate to reach out. I'm generally, I keep my disaster roots, and I'm generally available 24 hours a day. However, if you're going to call me at, like 2 o'clock in the morning to ask me about volunteering, you should ask me to get a cup of coffee first. Just a little heads up right there. Let's see. So a little bit about the Red Cross. Oh, I see Kathy's back. Kathy, I just took a few minutes to go ahead and introduce myself while you were off on the phone. So I'll turn it back over to you for anything else introductory that you would like to say.
Yeah, no, I just really want me to make sure that people coming on write their name and number in the chat. If you have questions, we want to kind of leave the questions to the end. You can either put them in the chat, and we will be taking people off mute at the end of the training so people can ask questions. And that's really all I have, and I'll give it back to you. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Kathy. So just a little bit about the Red Cross. I'm just going to give a very brief overview about some of the things that we do. And it's actually going to be important because some of the things, if you think about some of the things that the Red Cross stands for and our 7 fundamental principles, kind of guides the way our sheltering operations will go. So if there's ever a doubt, if you're in a situation and you're thinking, oh my gosh, you know, which way should I base my decision? Thinking about our fundamental principles is kind of the way we tell our volunteers to guide their steps. Our mission, of course, to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of our volunteers and the generosity of our donors. We are definitely a volunteer-led organization. For the 3 counties, Kern, Inyo, and Mono, we have 3 full-time staff members, 1 disaster services person, 1 volunteer services recruiter, that would be me, and our executive director. Everything else is based on the power of our volunteers. In the past couple of years, obviously, we've seen a change in sometimes how we do things, but there's never a question on what it is that we do. So we do have 7 fundamental principles at the American Red Cross. I'm not going to go through all of them. But again, as I say, sometimes what we tell our volunteers and the people that we work with is that if there's ever a doubt in what action you should take, base your decisions on our 7 fundamental principles, and you usually be heading in the right direction. 2, I want to point out the most are impartiality and humanity. Everyone, when we open shelters at the Red Cross, everyone is welcome in a Red Cross shelter. We don't discriminate based on anything. You know, people, we always know that when a disaster occurs, sometimes people who are not necessarily affected by the disaster show up. I'm so sorry, I'm struggling from the end of bronchitis, but that's totally fine. We are a humanitarian organization here to serve the people. We do have 5 lines of service. I just like to educate people on what the Red Cross does, because sometimes I think before I came to the Red Cross, I had no idea what the Red Cross actually did and how much service that they provided. So we do have 5 lines of service that you can see there, but of course our focus today will be disaster cycle services. And so what we'll be talking about today is kind of an abbreviated version of what training our Red Cross volunteers get when we are going to open a shelter. We're going to talk about the different phases, the opening stage, the operating phase, and the closing stage. I'm going to be talking pretty quickly because sometimes, you know, used to be that we do this training in 3 hours. I'm going to try and do it all in 45 minutes. I think I can do it. I have faith that you all can keep up with me. So hold on to your seats and off we go. So our sheltering program principles based first on the needs and expectations of our clients, right? If we're ever, I always tell people, if you're in a Red Cross shelter, look around and think to yourself, is this a place where you would like to have your family stay if they were impacted by disaster? We want to provide and communicate the location of a safe environment for the impacted community. And then because our training is standardized, it's provided consistently across the country, and we're always doing our best to improve that. Again, our mission statement to prevent and alleviate human suffering, but our commitment as shelter workers take care of the sheltering needs of people on an interim basis while they're arranging for their recovery or until they're able to return home. Again, you know, we are not the long-term recovery agency. We don't rebuild houses. We don't very much get involved in long-term recovery. What we are here to do is help the people who are impacted by disaster on a short-term basis. So generally at the Red Cross, we have 2 different types of shelters. We have evacuation shelters and our general population shelters. Evacuation shelters, we don't see too much here in California. Evacuation shelter is really what you would see. Usually, generally, you'll see it most during hurricane operations on the East Coast. And that's basically, we open evacuations pre-storm to give people a safe place to go to ride out the storm. Generally, we don't provide as much services. People bring their own bedding and et cetera. And then once the storm passes, what we do is we convert our shelters to what we call a general population shelter again. General population, again, because everyone's welcome in a Red Cross shelter. You can see here on our screen, there's some folks setting up some cots in a gymnasium. Unfortunately, you know, our shelters are not very glamorous, but we do absolutely try to make the best of the situation at any given point in time. So today we'll be talking about our general population shelters. So 3 phases of operation determines what we're going to be doing as a shelter worker. And I'm going to be teaching this from the point of view that you'll be the first one entering the shelter, and what do you do when faced with this gymnasium and other community center? What is it that you need to do? Oops, sorry about that. So we'll talk about the opening phase. And so what you're going to want to do is when you head to a shelter, you're going to want to think about 4 different things. One, you're going to want to put up signage, obviously, because if people don't know how to get to the shelter, it doesn't do a whole lot of good for us to have a shelter there. So we're talking putting up signs, we're talking about external signs so people can find the shelter. And then if needed, signage inside the shelter itself to kind of let people know what services are available. We're going to want to set up a feeding area, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. We're going to want to set up a dormitory area, which is what people generally think of when we say a Red Cross shelter or a general population shelter. They usually think of a dormitory, and then an information area. If you've been involved with disasters at all, you know that information is huge in a disaster, and since the shelter is a rather big part of a disaster response, people will come to the shelter to get information. So you're arrived at the shelter, you have this building. So what you're going to want to do is when we get there, we're going to look for pre-existing damage because either the Red Cross or the county is going to be responsible for any damage incurred while we're there. So we're going to check for any existing damage. We'll talk about that just a little more in just a second. We're going to talk to the facility about what equipment that is there that we can use, such as, televisions for client entertainment, refrigerators for food supplies or medication. We're going to take inventory of all the facility products to make sure that they get everything back that is there. And always, of course, considering accessibility so all clients can access our shelter. So Red Cross has been doing sheltering for a long time. And trust me, if you ever think to yourself, I wonder if there's a form for that. Trust me, there is a form for that. When we're doing our opening and closing inspection, there isn't an opening closing inspection form. And I kind of liken this part to when you go to rent a car, you're going to take a walk around the car with the rental agency, make sure that all those dings and scratches are noted so you're not responsible for them once you turn the car back in. And we're going to find a facility representative. We're going to walk through and we're just going to go through the checklist, noting all the different damages. It goes on a little bit more than this. And then what we do is we take this form and we put it someplace safe. And then when we're closing up the facility, what we're going to do is we're going to take this same form, the same questionnaire. We're going to go over it with the facility again, noting any damage that may have occurred during our time at the facility. Then we talked about an information area. And this can be one of a different things. You'll see pictures coming up that an information area is in the dormitory. But what we see, and the thing is that while people think of the Red Cross primarily as a dormitory area, we see people coming to our shelters for all different reasons. We serve meals in our shelter, so people will come for a meal. People will come to get information. People will come to get supplies if we're passing them out necessary for the disaster. So generally, I've been in Red Cross shelters and in charge of Red Cross shelters before. The information area is someplace that should be accessible to the public. And, as I'll talk about a little bit, our clients, we keep all of their information confidential. So if we have someone coming to look for a client or offer services, a bulletin board is a great place to have that available to the general public. So you'll want to designate a space for that. Here we can see I've taken this from our Shelter Fundamentals course. And here you can see they've encouraged us to put just a little bit of signage up because every one of those Red Cross things is a Red Cross sign. I think it might be a little bit overkill, but the one thing you definitely want to note is want to guide people to the main entrance. Here in this photo, in this graphic, I think it's a little bit unfortunate because here, if you look to the top of the right, you see here the accessible entrance to the shelter is different from the main entrance to the shelter. And we do try very, very, very hard to make our shelters accessible to everyone, considering access and functional needs when we're opening up our shelters. So we would, in a perfect world, have our accessible entrance be the main entrance to the shelter. But if not, we definitely want to make sure that people with an access and functional needs, such as a wheelchair, walker, etc., can also access that shelter. Anytime you have an entrance to the shelter facility, That's not the main entrance. We do like to keep those doors locked from the outside so we can control entrance into the shelter and keep track of people who are there. So please do, we do try to put signage directing people to that main entrance. Here, obviously, it looks kind of like a school. And we've designated some of these areas, you know, like a teacher's lounge could be a break area for our staff. Dormitory, gymnasium, that would probably be a dormitory. Obviously, cafeteria is where we'd set up our feeding area. Computer lab will probably make that off limits, and the school would probably want to make that off limits just because there's, electronic equipment that they might want not to be available to the general public, etc. But again, it's just like I say, this might be a little bit overkill, but again, we're just trying to make it easy for people to move through the shelter and find things that they need. When you're setting up the dormitory, this picture here is during our COVID-19 responses. We are still sort of at the tail end of COVID-19. While masks generally are not required most places right now, they are still required in congregate sheltering, as well as healthcare services. I'll let Kathy talk a little bit more about masking. But here you kind of get the idea of how glamorous our shelters are. They get basically a cot, some blankets, a comfort kit with some toiletries, etc. And when we're setting up for our dormitory area, we just want to make sure, obviously, the picture on your screen is just a suggestion, but we do want to keep walkways between aisles and rows of cots free for people to be able to move through safely. And again, considering those with an access and functional need. Generally speaking, in a dormitory, we do not allow food for the most part in a dormitory area. We do allow water and baby formula, and we do that just because for health and safety, for the most part, people start to sprinkle food and crumbs in, etc. They tend to attract little critters that are just not what you want to see in a dormitory area, because essentially this is the bedroom for a whole bunch of people who have been needing to leave their homes. I've mentioned an information desk in the dormitory. That's fine. I could go either way on it. We'll talk about operating the dormitory, and we will want to have someone in the dormitory keeping an eye on our clients. But I will tell you, here the cots are nicely laid out in rows of 4 cots, in little groups. And once you set up that area, it looks very nice. But once you introduce people into that setting, all your nicely laid out cots will now then be kind of shuffled around as people make accommodations. My first shelter I worked at, I had never actually stepped foot in a Red Cross shelter before. And I was made the shelter manager just because of my position as the volunteer counterpart to the then disaster program manager. It was for the Tehachapi mudslides a number of years ago. We got there and there were 3 people who were sleeping. And I set up about 15 cots and sent a picture to my boss, and she's just to be like, so, boss, am I doing good? She's like, well, that's a lot of cots. I don't think we'll see that many. So you'll just have to clean them when you take them down. It turned out that the Tehachapi mudslides were a larger impact than we had originally bargained for. We thought that they were going to be setting up shelters in Tehachapi and Mojave. We did not know at the time that the Mojave shelter did not open. So about 2 o'clock in the morning, the CHP came to me and said, okay, Red Cross, your first busload of clients will be arriving in about 5 minutes. And I was certain that I had misheard them when he said busload. But no, that was first of many busloads to come. We had about 225 clients. We opened a second shelter that night. I broke a number of official Red Cross rules. We had people sitting on cots eating, McDonald's egg McMuffins for breakfast in the morning. I was certain that they were going to fire me as a volunteer because it was very chaotic and I was kind of bending the rules. But at the end of the day, like I say, you'll hear me say it again and again in this training. If our primary focus is the clients, right? And making sure that they're safe and secure and have their needs met. And if we have to, I'm not advocating breaking the rules, but I'm just saying if you have to bend a rule now and again to make sure that the clients are out of the weather and are taken care of, I would support you in that. At the end of the day, at the Hatchme mudslides, it was very strange because the shelter was, I finally got to sleep about 3 o'clock the next afternoon, napped for a couple of hours, woke up, and the 225 people that were in 2 of our shelters had dwindled down to about 6 people. Because it was an odd situation. People were just stranded. Their cars were stranded. They had all made their way home. For a short while, I thought it was a very strange Red Cross hallucination, but I was not fired and ended up taking a Red Cross staff position after that because I was so committed to the mission. Again, your feeding areas, you're going to want to have 3 different feeding areas in mind when you're setting up your shelter. You're going to want to have a snack and beverage table. Again, this can be accessible to the general public who just comes into the shelter looking for perhaps maybe some water, some snacks to tide them over. That's available 24 hours a day. You're going to want to make sure they have a place for people to eat, and then a place to serve meals. As you can see in the dining area photograph, what they've done is they've split the gym into part of it is a dormitory, part of it is a dining area. We'll talk about feeding a little bit more later, but again, remembering that at the Red Cross and in any shelters, we're subject to the same safe food handling guidelines as a restaurant. So we don't take donations generally of food from outside sources unless they come from a commercially approved kitchen, which is a good thing and a bad thing all at the same time. A bad thing because it does mean we don't get to have grandma's cookies that come into the shelter as a donation. A good thing because in these days and ages, I've heard rumors that some of the brownies that have come into Red Cross shelters before may have had additions that may have had a soothing effect, shall we say, on the clientele. But again, that's not something that we want to have our clients exposed to. So again, setting up your feeding area, a snack and beverage table, a place to serve food, and a place for our clients to eat it. And then you're going to want to set up a reception area. Reception area is kind of like the front desk in a hotel, right? It's going to be the first faces that you see when you come to your shelter. So you want to kind of put your organized individuals, your smiley individuals. You don't want the surly person who's going to be set up front greeting people, because you want to be that safe, friendly, welcoming face to the shelter. And when you're setting up your registration area, again, just we're going to want to control access to the shelter. We've tried to block off our exterior doors so people come in through one main entrance, and we want to set up our reception tables so as to kind of I don't want to say block the access, not that we don't want to block the access and make it unsafe for people to evacuate in the event of emergency, but we do want to make sure it's a controlled entrance so we can meet everyone that comes in. So here you can see our tables are set up controlling access to the shelter. So now we've set up our shelter. All looks well. And now we're ready to introduce people, and the fun will begin. Oftentimes at Red Cross, because we have a tendency to use the same shelters again, in various locations, we do have people who come to the shelter before we're finished setting up. And again, just like we don't want to have them wait outside. They can come in. They can absolutely help set up cots. When I was up in Tehachapi, my 15 cots didn't come anywhere near to filling the demand. So I had CHP officers setting up cots. I had clients setting up cots at 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to be quiet and not very well succeeding. So again, it's about serving the clients. So again, I did touch on this before, and you'll hear me say it time and time again. Everyone is welcome at a Red Cross shelter because we do want to serve the whole community, including people with disabilities and others with access and functional needs. All of these folks had the same right to participation in everyday life and everyday projects. They must be able to access the built world, including our shelters and other service delivery sites. We want to make sure that they're able to access all of our programs and feedings that are available, such as feeding or any bulk distribution of supplies that we're giving away in the shelter. And we want to give them to make sure they have the same information as everyone else. Just again, touching briefly on service animals, pets, I'll let Kathy address pets a little bit more. We generally don't necessarily encourage animals being in our shelters proper, because that can cause a dilemma. It depends on the shelter itself and the county's stance on that, but we will always try to co-locate an animal shelter with our shelters, so people can have their pets nearby. But service animals must be admitted into Red Cross shelters. Basically, the ADA defines a service animal as any dog or that is individually trained to do work or perform tasks for the benefit of an individual with a disability, including physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or other mental disabilities. Remember that service animals are not pets. We, as as the shelter operators, etc., we do our best to assist the owners with food and supplies when we are able and when it's needed. Assistance animals, that's a whole nother discussion. Assistance animals or emotional support animals. But basically, the service animal helps people with disabilities and other access and functional needs maintain their independence. There are two animals that actually qualify as service animals. Cats are not one of them. One of them is dogs, and the other one is miniature horses, who helps provide stability perhaps to someone who needs assistance with walking. I've said it before in every single one of my shelter trainings. I'll say it again. If you happen to get a miniature pony up in your shelter, please do invite me up. I absolutely want to see the miniature horse, miniature pony service animal live and in person. We can ask two questions when it comes to service animals. The first one, is this service animal required because of a disability? Obviously, the answer must be yes. And what work or tasks has the animal been trained to perform? Obviously, there are some exceptions. If there is a person who is blind, who has a guide dog to help them see, we don't necessarily need to ask that question. But what we're trying to weed out is the animals who are there just as, a companion animal. Based on the answer to those questions, the service animal can come into the shelter. So sorry about that. And again, oops. And then what we cannot ask or do regarding service animals, we cannot require special identification for the animal, like a harness or a vest that says service animal or guide dog. Frankly, those don't help anyways. You can buy them off the internet. And we have a dog here at my house who has a service animal vest. They have not been trained to do anything except go to the back door when they need to go out. And they have learned this so well, they have now learned that they control the behavior of the humans by going to the back door. So I believe they revel in the fact that they can get up, go to the back door, and the humans will get up. And then they go back and lay on the couch because now they have gotten the humans once again to do their bidding. We cannot ask the person about their disability specifics. Obviously, that could differ if our health service workers in the shelter need more information. But as far as allowing the service animal into the shelter, we cannot ask questions about the person's disability. We cannot refuse admittance or treat the person in a manner different or less favorably than any of our other clients. And we cannot restrict that person with their service animals access to any area where food is being solved. Obviously, we've all seen true service animals, and these animals are the best animals in all of the land. They sit underneath the owner's chair as if they are content to be there for all of their lives, as opposed to the faux service animal who may, bark and yip at other things. But the service animal's owner is responsible for their care and feeding, as well as any cleaning up that they need to do. But again, the person with a disability cannot be asked to remove their service animal or themselves from the premises unless the animal is out of control or the animal poses a direct threat to the health or safety of others. Again, we are always focusing on the individual, asking if they need assistance and figuring out, letting them guide our actions in serving them in the shelter. We will talk about any specific needs they may have in the shelter, such as durable medical equipment or dietary considerations. But again, we're going to let their behavior guide ours when we're taking care of them. Did say yes, there will be a ton of forms at your shelter. Again, there is a form for that, trust me. Generally speaking, those forms are at the registration area. Again, if you are tasked with working in registration, you will be the first contacts. Here it says first contacts that the clients have with the Red Cross, but they're the first friendly face that you will see when you are providing them with some respite during this disaster. And when someone comes into the shelter, we are going to have everyone sign in when they enter the shelter, even if they are not going to stay in the dormitory. And this includes visitors to the shelter, people who are working at the shelter. Everyone that comes into the shelter is going to be asked to sign in. We're going to find out what the client needs there at the shelter and direct them to the resources, whether that's food, water, medications, support, etc. Direct them to the appropriate resource, and just generally getting them onto their next direction. Working in reception and registration, always nice to have snacks and drinks in the reception area. Coffee is a great thing to have on the reception area. Coffee seems to be the great normalizer, right? If there's coffee in the world, not everything can be going wrong. I was in the San Fernando Valley during the Northridge earthquake, crazy shaking at 4 a.m. in the morning, and about 7 a.m. we finally got out of the house, found a barbecue, made sure that we were safe from gas, put on an old kettle and made coffee, and it was just like, okay, there's coffee, all is right with the world. So we want to make sure that our registration and reception area is always staffed to welcome those clients. We're going to give a shelter client welcome handout to the clients if they're in line to register, making sure all the paperwork is secure and confidential. If a client comes in and has an emergency medical need, we're going to call 911, rather than making them register for the shelter or any other services. Challenges reception could be long lines, could be running out of forms, clients that are injured, hungry, etc. Yes, we ran into all of these in Tehachapi. So generally we'll insist the client in passing them out. But as I said, breaking my own rules, I was passing out shelter dormitory registration forms to the clients left and right because I had about a 25 square foot place where people could get in out of the rain before they met the registration area. So again, clients first. Here, just a brief look at the shelter welcome handout. It is a two-page handout, a front and back handout, and it gives people information on the rules in the shelter. A little bit information on what to expect. Tells people like parents are responsible for watching their children when they're in the shelter. We are shelter workers, we are not babysitters, and other similar information. There is no smoking, no vaping, no alcoholic beverages, no drugs, except prescription medicines as necessary in a Red Cross shelter. And we do try to enforce that as best as possible. And then if they're going to be staying in our dormitory with us, we are going to ask them to fill out a dormitory registration form. This has changed recently, so if you've worked in a shelter before or seen this, you'll see it to be a little bit different. It is much easier to fill out for the shelter registration. I'm going to go over all of it just so you have a good idea of what the form will look like. Here's the top. This is what our folks are going to be completing when they register for dormitory services. We want to make sure we get their family name. Don't worry about the part that has SRT triage color. SRT stands for Shelter Resident Transition. And that's a team that comes in while we're helping people figure out their next steps. But in the beginning, when we're welcoming people to the shelter, no need to do that. We're going to ask if there's anything urgent that the family needs right now or the next 6 to 8 hours, just to identify any immediate needs. We're going to ask if the client must register with a government agency, and there are steps we can take there. A number of reasons that a person might need to do that. Registered sex offenders is one. Some people occasionally, I've heard that have health conditions such as tuberculosis, etc. They're required to disclose that. Could be a number of reasons that we want to take the person aside and have a conversation with them on what that reason might be, and work with perhaps local law enforcement or health services, etc., to determine the next steps. We want to get a primary phone number for the contact for the client, and also their email, identify any language needs, and then document the number of people who are there, plus any animals that the client has brought with us. Again, much shorter information than we used to. Down at the bottom, again, this first front page, this again will be collected from the clients later if needed, talking about when we're going to help transition them out of the shelter. And then the back is our disaster health services, or perhaps your local health services. There's some information there that can help them do their job better. All right. Again, we did mention that when people are coming into the shelter, everyone should sign in and sign out. This helps us keep track of people in the event of an emergency, and help keep a track, if who has come into the shelter. So again, that's clients, shelter workers, visitors, et cetera, et cetera. If you have visitors to the shelter, we do want to make sure first and foremost that we're keeping the identity and information of our clients confidential, because we never know specifically who might be looking for them. It could be someone who has the best of intentions, a family member, or it could be someone perhaps who does not have the best interests of our client in mind, taking advantage of the disaster to find a person. Generally speaking, again, maintaining client confidentiality. We generally say something like, "I'm sorry, client information is confidential. Be happy to take your name and information, and if the person's here, we'll have them contact you." Again, that's where that information board in the common area is useful. Public officials, law enforcement, media, etc. There are some specific guidelines for them. Obviously, our public officials, we do want to make sure that they're able to access our shelters. Law enforcement, again, we want to cooperate them best as possible. But again, protecting the confidentiality information of our clients. Media, we again get a lot of media attention in our shelters, and we certainly want to encourage that, because it helps keep people aware of the disaster, and perhaps will garner some support for our clients' recovery. But we do, again, protecting our clients. We're going to let everyone know, no photography in our dormitory area, which is a little bit harder these days because, obviously you can be streaming live on social media with simply, a cell phone. So sorry, y'all.
May we ask questions?
Preferable.
Okay,
You can put them in the chat if you'd like, or we will just have people come off mute at the end and be able to ask questions.
okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Cool. Unaccompanied minors, not a common situation, but if there is someone, we do, of course, there's a form for that. But if we do have an unaccompanied minor, we do want to make sure that we have someone with them at all times, and follow up with the shelter manager or the county to find out best practices for that. Taking donations, something, it was actually kind of nice during COVID, where we could simply say no donations allowed at the shelter. The one thing we do not do is accept money at the shelter, because it may create the impression that we are accepting fees for services. If someone would like to donate to the Red Cross, I would just simply give them the Red Cross website, redcross.org, or 1-800-RED-CROSS, and they can follow up there. Other than that, I'll let Kathy talk a little bit more about donations. But again, we don't take donations of food, and would very much like to limit it to perhaps only what our clients can actually use at the shelter. Again, if you've been around disaster response for any point in time, you know that donations during a disaster are frequently referred to as the disaster after disaster, because they can get overwhelming very quickly. But whenever we're dealing with visitors at the shelter, we want to be courteous but firm, making sure that all visitors, again, signing in and out, never giving out confidential information or identity of our clients, and just knowing what we're going to be doing about donations at the shelter. Information area, again, we don't necessarily have a person staffing that, but we want to make sure that someone is updating that because, again, information is crucial for our clients staying at the dormitory and also necessary for the general public who may stop by. And when we're talking about information, setting up a bulletin board, something that looks more organized, like the one on the right. Other types of information that can be shared with shelter clients, having local law enforcement or fire stop by and give an update on relief efforts or recovery efforts based on the disaster, shelter resident meetings, making sure that people who are going to work, are able to hear that information. Also, written updates, and again, keeping in mind those access and functional needs, any language barriers or other hindrances to making sure that everyone gets the same information. Here's a large shelter gathering. Again, hopefully none of us will see these amounts of people in one of our shelters anytime soon. Again, things that people want to know, just general shelter information, kind of the shelter routine, what times meals will be served, lights out, etc. We do have a lights out time. It's quiet time in the evening. It's obviously, we don't require that people go to sleep at a certain point in time, but we want to be respectful of those people who are doing that, give people information on what's going on with the disaster and our disaster operations, any community resources, daily schedule again, any safety concerns, recreational activities. I will tell you, shelters are really stinking boring places, right? You've left your home and you have basically now, instead of your home, and your TV, you have a cot to sleep on. So we always want to try to have some type of recreational activities and opportunities for the clients to help in the shelter as well. Here, just to kind of, again, an example of a Red Cross shelter in use. A little bit of difference from that original nice, neat diagram we saw. But again, see, there is still plenty of room for people to navigate in between the cots. Again, always in the dormitory and in the shelter itself, our clients are our #1 concern. Remembering again that the dormitory is the private place for these residents, essentially their bedroom that is closed to anyone who does not have a need to be there. We're going to monitor that entrance and exit just to make sure people are getting in okay and that everything is going on appropriately. No eating, no smoking, no vaping, no alcohol, no illegal drugs, and no weapons of any kind. And again, just watching those aisles, emergency access, exits, etc. Most important dormitory tasks, again, are our clients. And again, one, just because we want to make sure they're doing well, two, because it's really boring. Dormitory, I love to walk through the dormitory in a shelter and check in and see how the clients are doing. They will tell you their story because it's a way of with them coping with the disaster as well. We're going to offer assistance to anyone who looks to be needing it. But what we're going to be looking for is unmet needs, things that the clients may not have indicated to us when they first came in. And answer any questions that they might have. Some of that, people don't want to necessarily speak up. So we're going to be looking for that body language, right? A client that seems to be, a little bit, or perhaps withdrawn, and just, absolutely ask those questions. Perhaps they didn't, mention a need when they first came to the shelter, or if they need, anything from our health services people. They are our first priority. And we use these interactions to figure out what their needs are, encourage them and helping them cope with the disaster, always getting them thinking about their next steps and finding out if there's anything that we can do to make their stay better. Inventory here again is kind of an example of a snack area. Not a lot of snacks there, just looks like some, I don't know, pears and maybe apples or plums. Coffee, water, things of that nature. We'll talk a little bit about reporting because we are going to keep track of things that we're serving and keep track of those inventory items to make sure that we're putting out an SOS. If we're in need of snacks, food, or any other items, generally when we're counting them, individual snacks are counted at the snack table are counted as a snack, including water or coffee. Unless water or coffee is served with a meal, and then it's just included. But again, always looking for those inventory items, trying to be proactive and see, make sure we have everything that we need for our clients. Again, safe handling of food. Always want to make it, like I say, subject to the same safe food handling guidelines as a restaurant. A lot of times, well, I shouldn't say a lot of times, but I've seen in the news before, oh my gosh, Red Cross is horrible. They threw out, like a whole garbage full of hamburgers or something like that. And while that seems unfortunate, I know there's got to be a story behind it. Because again, if we get these donations and they're not from a place that we know is safe for our clients, unfortunately, we cannot serve that to our clients. And the only thing I could imagine that would be worse than Red Cross throwing out, a garbage bag full of hamburgers is headlines saying, that we served tainted food to our residents. One, because we don't want to get our residents sick. Two, because I don't want to work in a shelter when everyone has food poisoning. That would just not be a happy place. Would not be happy for our health services people who are there helping the clients, not happy for the clients, and certainly not happy for anyone. There will be a daily shelter report. We do keep track of the number of clients who sleep in the shelter. Just helps us with our planning purposes and helps the county as well. And we're always looking at things. Here's our current daily shelter report. We're going to be looking at how many meals might be needed for the next day, plus looking for any other unmet needs. And then closing up the shelter. This one's pretty easy. I know I've breezed through this really fast. Closing up the shelter, basically, that's pretty simple, right? We're going to give people at least a 48-hour notice that the shelter is closing. We're not going to just kick them out, with 5 minutes notice, because we want to make sure that everybody has a plan. And then what we're going to do is basically clean up after ourselves, making sure that the facility is returned to the facility owners in at least as nice a condition as we received it, taking a final inventory, gathering all of our records, including those registration forms together, cleaning up any equipment that we've used, restocking supplies, etc. So sorry, and returning it again to its pre-disaster condition. And that, I told Kathy I'd get done in about 45 minutes, and I think I have managed to achieve that. So Kathy, anything, I know I went through that super quick. Kathy, anything for you to add? If not, then I say we can move on to the Q&As.
Yeah, I did want to add, like, when you're talking about a couple things, so the masking, currently we have a shelter in place in Bridgeport. We definitely want to encourage masking. We have masks and stuff available in each shelter. We have COVID kits from when we were dealing with COVID, so there is those types of supplies in the shelters, and we will put them out on the registration table, and we will have signage. We're not there to police people wearing masks, but we want all staff and feeding staff to certainly wear masks, and we want to encourage it. And as far as pets, it kind of depends on the area. We typically use schools, and we use our community centers throughout the Mono County. And we try to work with our animal shelter partners to house them, but some people like to have their pets with them. And it just depends on how many people are in the shelter. Again, it's all about the clients. We want to be flexible. If we have something like Bridgeport where it's large and there's upstairs, downstairs, and we can separate people, but there's, there could be people in the facility that are allergic to animals. Animals would always have to be either leashed or in a kennel when they're in the shelters, except for our service animals. And it just depends on the place. Typically schools, they're not going to want our animals in there, but you just work with your shelter manager, and they will work with the county shelter coordinators to see what we can accommodate for those folks. And the intake forms, the new intake forms, really quickly, that we just are updating some of our forms, so they're not out at all of the facilities. So we will utilize what we have, and we're trying to get those out to as many of those facilities as we can through our offices throughout the county. the confidentiality and locating people and coming into the center and visitors. We have people that will come into centers, and we aren't always in a situation where we're set up that we can have people, like, they can come in and they can basically see everybody that's in the facility. So sometimes it's difficult to have a registration table outside of the shelter itself. But if we have people there that have concerns, then we should try to find, they can come and talk to our staff, and we want to know about that. And with unattended minors, we would work with our child welfare staff through social services, and we would make accommodations for those unattended minors. And then donations. We do not like to take donations of items. If we have donations that come in, as far as like, if there's for instance, we have at Bridgeport and we had a food distribution. And so we can accommodate some of those things, but we don't always have, gloves or different things that come in. It just depends. Just again, work with your shelter manager that's on duty. They'll work with the coordinators, and we can coordinate that. I think I saw a couple questions in the chat about clarifying who might be visiting and going to the shelters. Currently in Bridgeport, we have we were having a shelter and warming station. So a lot of times people just come in during the day and they want to get information. It's more of a assistance center, and they might get meals, and then they don't want to stay in the center. And then we have a question that, do we have medics on at the shelter? No, we do not have medics. When we open a shelter in Mono County, what we do is we work with our public health, we work with our mental health partners. And if there is a need, we work with them. And if there is any other types of needs where we would need to call 911 or anything, we work with our sheriffs. Typically, there's sheriffs in all of the areas within the counties. And so we just deal with those incidents and disruptions as they come about. Is there any other questions out there? If you can raise your hand or take yourself off of mute. We have 188 people. Go ahead, Dan Corning. Can you unmute? Dan, you're muted. I'm trying to find you. Uh, 192 people. I'm trying to find you.
I have a question because I've been in the communities for a long time, and my house got hit by the avalanche in 2017. And at night, we had to evacuate, and you guys set up a shelter at the community center in Crowley, but we didn't have a kennel for my dog. I mean, when you're evacuating, you don't take a kennel, and it created a pretty big problem. And fortunately, Peter George is a friend of ours, and he lived there. He's on the sheriff's department, and he put us up. But for someone who doesn't have a connection like that, it really, really becomes difficult. And you're kind of, what are you going to do with your dog?
Yeah, we've come across that, and Red Cross, along with the county, has tried to ease up on some of those restrictions. We do have now in our shelter trailers, we have one kennel in each of our shelter trailers. Our trailers are quite full. And as I recall, when we did, because I was the one opening that shelter in Crawley in 2017, there also wasn't any power and the generator was buried. So we ended up housing a lot of people other places that night. And it was about 11:30 at night, as I recall. So, when you have things that are in the middle of the night as well, it's difficult to get services. And when there's weather and those types of things, we just need to try to work with folks the best that we can. And we're working on trying to accommodate those things. Again, I think it's just a matter of speaking with the shelter managers and trying to find a solution, short term and then longer term.
Okay, and by the way, I'm a June Lake Fire volunteer. And they just put out that sandbags are available at the community center if you want at Station 2. So, just that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, they do have the sandbags over there now, so.
Okay, that was my question and concern.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
I'm good.
Okay, anything else from anybody else? I have a question. What if we get called out to work and we cannot get there? Is anyone in the county vehicle able to pick us up to work? This is the reason, at least in Mono County, I try to have our volunteers within the communities that they're in. And through this next storm, we are trying to prepare for all areas, and I certainly don't want to take anybody out of their areas or make them drive in a storm. I don't want to add to the emergency. We want to assist. We have had folks in June Lake that have said, you know, I can help, but I need somebody to come pick me up. We can try to work with those accommodations if we have to work with them again. It's just kind of on a situational basis how we're going to handle that. Hey, Robin, I think you're sharing your screen. Thank you. Am I missing any other questions in there? Let's see. Keep dog leashes, harnesses in your car at all times. I'm in Mammoth in the neighborhood above the village. I may not be able to get out of my road. Yeah, again, we'll try to work with people as we can. We, right now, as I said, we're trying to assign people to shelters and, you know, we're just getting availabilities and we will kind of deal with those types of issues as they come about. Am I missing anything else?
One
Got a
new question
question.
about road closures, Kathy.
Road closures, sorry, it keeps scrolling up on me. Let's see, roads closures are, what road closures for those of us in Inyo? Will there be escorts for volunteers? I not sure if I have any people in Inyo County. Maybe they can take themselves off of mute and address that. Sorry, I told you how to do it. Do we have?
Yeah, how's it going? Yeah, I'm just out in Round Valley, so I'm just at the bottom of the grade, and I was curious since they've been closing the road right at Gorge Road. You know, if they'd be doing any sort of escorts for us for volunteering from out here.
Okay.
Okay, I got our thing on. Hi. We're from Walker.
Okay.
We're just wondering if something's gonna happen here or.
Well, you know, we have a lot of rain coming in and on top of the snow that we already have. From our reports, we basically heard that if you have anywhere from about 2 feet or less of snow, you can assume that that snow is going to be gone after this storm. For the most part, we're looking at rain coming in tonight and coming through and continuing through tonight, tomorrow, and possibly into Saturday. I'm not, my main concerns right now are Mammoth Lakes, June Lake, continuing with Bridgeport and possibly avalanches in Crawley Lake. The other outline areas I think will probably be okay, but we are just trying to prepare. And so we just put water and snacks and stuff at all of the places. And we just ask people to volunteer or be available if we happen to open. That way we have a lot of things going on, so we'll be better prepared and be able to hopefully you know, address everybody's needs much quicker by preparing before.
Hey Kathy, I think that question regarding the escorts for volunteers, that's coming from a Mono County employee. So like if we are Mono County employees that live down here in Inyo, are there ever escorts for them to get up there, or would you rely on them down in this area?
Yeah, you
Or
know,
I'm in Inyo too, that's why I'm saying here.
yeah, no, Yvonne, I would, again, I don't want to add to the problem. I'm going to try to use the resources as local as I can. And, you know, as time goes on, and I think what's going to happen with a lot of these things, you know, when things first start, you utilize the people that you have. As things kind of wind down, weather starts getting better, you can get more people in, the road starts clearing. Then what you're trying to do is you're trying to relieve the people that have been doing shifts for the whole event. And, you know, that's kind of where we're at with Bridgeport. We're trying to get some supports up there, but we never get a long enough gap in our storms to get things deployed and get people up there. So I'm still continuing to ask for supports, and I'm asking for supports even after, because we'll have some cleanup and inventories and all sorts of things to do with that. So we'll work with that on an individual basis. I have Sherry Hooper, and Bree, I'll take you next, but Sherry, did you have a question?
So I know that we're covering, because we're down in Inyo, and I had heard, well, I had asked a question of a council member, but are we going to open up any sheltering down in Bishop for any of Inyo? Because we know that Aspendale's gearing up for avalanches as well, because they've been hit pretty hard as well. So
Yeah, and I'm not sure who we have on from Inyo. I'm looking through to see if there's anybody I can kind of call on to maybe ask that. Is there anybody in Inyo that can maybe follow up with that question?
Kathy, this is Anna Scott in Inyo
Thank
County,
you.
so I can answer that. Right now, our information is that there's about 20 people in the Aspendale area, many of whom have already made arrangements to not be in that area. They have been asked to try to make arrangements to not be in Aspendale through this storm system and potentially next. So at this point, we're waiting to hear. We have not been activated for a shelter, but that could change depending on what the needs are. Because it's such a small number at this time, we're hoping that if it's just a couple of people, if any, that need to be sheltered, we would probably put them in a hotel rather than open up a shelter. But we're still waiting to have more information and are not actively activated for that.
Thank you. Bree?
I just wanted to touch in on the escort. CHP has been doing many escorts up and down when the weather conditions allow them to, and when their staffing allows them to. So they have been escorting essential service workers, which if you were going to a shelter, you would be an essential worker, but they've been doing escorts for essential workers as they can and as the weather permits. So most of the time when the roads are closed, it's because of whiteout conditions, in which case they usually don't do escorts, but CHP is on alert for that. They've been doing it nonstop for what feels like the whole winter. And so they are able to do that, and essential workers can get through when they are doing escorts.
Okay. I also have a couple other things in the chat. Do we have a preliminary assignment list or shift sign-up sheet? We are starting one through the Department of Social Services in Mono County, and we've asked our department heads, and we're calling volunteers. We're trying not to just have a free-for-all list out there. It just gets too crazy. So we're trying to contain it. And then as we open shelters, and we need to continue to support those shelters, we work with the shelter managers that are on shift. So the coordinator will work with those shelter managers to assist us in getting other folks signed up for different shifts. I have something from Cara. is there need for volunteers to do sandbags? I'm sure that there is. I'm not in with, you know, that types of things. Maybe Bree, I don't know if there's, you know, Bree may be a good person for like access and functional needs to touch base with Cara. If there's people that need sandbags, and we can maybe kind of work with them to get something to them, but that's kind of out of my lane, and I don't have any information on that. I'm sorry. And then Megan just says, thank you all for attending. Please feel free to reach out, and if needed, and if you'd like to become a volunteer, you can start the application at redcross.org/volunteers. Volunteers are definitely needed in Inyo and Mono counties, and it will be a help to be better prepared next time. And we continue to try to recruit, but this is when we get the people that come out of the woodworks. We had 193 people on this call today, so that is awesome. Is there any other questions? And we're
Yeah, if I
here.
could-
Go ahead.
So I was just going to say thank you everyone from the Red Cross for your attendance today. We appreciate being asked to do the shelter training. I know I went through things at a kind of a blistering pace, and you're just getting a high level overview. We do have a lot more training available. You know, our shelter workers are very well trained, shelter manager training, etc. Again, like Kathy said, we would love to have more volunteers up there. It would just better help be prepared for next time. But just, you know, for myself and the Red Cross, thank you for having us.
Yeah, in Red Cross, we in Inyo and Mono counties, certified completely, we only have 8 Red Cross volunteers. So it's a great opportunity. It's you know, they do have some good trainings. There's different things in different functions that we can do in the neighborhoods. We've done some fire campaigns and different things like that. So if people want to get involved, you can just go to the redcross.org, and you can get in touch with the county folks too, and they can get you in touch with people. We have liaisons in Inyo County, and yeah. So I want to know, Anna, too, do you have any other thoughts or remarks or anything that you wanted to get across for people that are on the call?
Well, I want to thank Megan for doing this just-in-time training, and Kathy and anyone else in Mono who was involved in getting this set up. We did have several staff from Inyo County join. Thank you all who were able to do that at the last minute. I just want to clarify, we'll provide a little bit more information to our staff later this afternoon during our 4 o'clock meeting. I just want to clarify, we're not asking staff to self-deploy at this time. We'll be coordinating with Mono County if there's a need either to support Mono County or if there's a need in Inyo County. This was just a really good opportunity to give more people some exposure to how shelter operations go. And in the case that we need to use those new skills during the storm or next or in the future. So thank you for letting us jump on with you, and always appreciate the refresher too for any of us who've been through the training before.
Yeah, we definitely don't want people self-deploying. Sherry, you still have your hand up, so I didn't know if you had another question or.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I forgot
That's
to take
okay.
it down.
That's okay. And then, you know, if anybody's on the call that has not put their name, phone number, and email address into the chat, please do so that we can have record. I will go ahead and get that copy of the list to you as well, Anna. And if there's no other questions, we can adjourn. You're not hearing anything. Let's keep fingers crossed. Everybody stay safe. Be careful. Take care of
Kathy?
your own and your neighbors.
Thank you.
Hey, Kathy, real
Yes.
quick, what is our next VOAD meeting?
Our next VOAD meeting is April 27th.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
At what time?
1:15.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks all. Appreciate it. Okay, Megan, I'm just copying the chat so I can get all that stuff over to you. And
Cool.
I will go ahead and sign off and we can touch base in a little bit. Thanks all.
Sounds good.
Take care.
See you, John. See you, Kathy.
Bye.
See you, Sam.